How many of you have experienced this problem before? You have an awesome idea for a new character, you put in the work, you sit down and you write an epic backstory, it's like 6 pages, and now you're ready to roleplay or write your new book, or you put on your costume, the moment of truth comes, and this character just sounds like a slightly different version of you. Characters are supposed to be completely unique, independent people capable of making their own choices and having their own thoughts. You wrote out a backstory, you outlined their ideals, maybe gave them a couple personality quirks. So what happened? Why does this character act and speak exactly like all of the other characters you created? My belief is that we have been taught that creating characters is as simple as just answering a couple questions, filling out a couple blocks on a piece of paper. Character sheets like this have trained us to think of characters as archetypes and not as people. Your traits, your bonds, your class are not who you are. Your backstory is not your personality. Your character needs to have something inside of them, some internal motor that will always drive them to keep moving forward. And if your backstory were your personality, it'd probably look something like this. A dark, brooding figure sits in the corner. He looks cool, mysterious, a lone wolf. He keeps to himself, seeking revenge on the captain of the guard who slaughtered his family over a debt. He trusts no one, yet he is a loyal ally if you earn his companionship and trust. But for now, there he sits. If you approach him, he is gruff and rude with you, shares no information about himself at all. Getting answers out of this man is harder than pulling out werewolf teeth. Hey, do you want to go on an adventure with me? No, go away, I'm being mysterious. Oh, okay. Don't forget, if you say no, the story ends. Actually, yes. Well, great. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What brings you to these parts? No, I'm being mysterious. You are no fun to be around. Brooding is my personality. He knows everything about himself. He knows why he's here and why it is he's doing what he's doing. And yet from a narrative standpoint, this character would have no reason to speak to anybody. If left to his own devices, this character would sit here alone for the rest of the night in complete silence and then go about his business completely solo. He has to be pulled through the story by some external force, whether that is by another character or by the narrator themselves. I once ran a game where during the first session, every character was some loner with a troubled backstory. So I put them all on a ship in order to limit how far away from each other they could get in the hopes that they would have some interaction. And then I gave them mutual character conversations so that they would talk to each other. And then eventually when that didn't work, I also put them through a mass amount of combat on the ship in order to force them to work together. And then the second that it was all over, everyone went back to just sitting in their own corners of the ship, not talking to anybody, because all of them were choosing to use the emotional baggage of their backstories as what their characters were doing. And that isn't inherently wrong. They were all playing what they wrote for their characters. Eventually the game ended up being fine, and it ended up being so roleplay heavy that I didn't have to run combat or anything. I could just sit back and listen to these characters have full conversations for an entire 4-hour session. It was amazing. But what I'm saying is that don't set your characters up for failure by writing them to directly be antisocial. I'm not saying that characters are never dark and mysterious or that characters can't keep secrets. The solution to this problem is not to simply just stand and recite your backstory to the world the first time a character gets introduced. The solution rather is that backstories are not nearly as important as identifying what your character's motivation is. What do you want? Your motivation is something that has to come from inside of you, independent of your past, that will motivate your character to take action within the world. And there is what is called the call to action. I'm sure we're all familiar with the hero's journey, but that is a template for story structure, not character creation. So do not just wait for some external force to come along to kick your character into taking action, because the second that external force stops pushing your character will stop moving. If your only motivation is to seek vengeance on another character, then there are really only 2 ways that that can go narratively. You can either choose to seek vengeance forever, the story never ends and you become a one-note character, or you can choose to solve that problem, take your revenge, and then your character arc ends. Revenge is a goal, something to be checked off of a list of many other goals that your character might have. Your motivation has to be an action, something which will drive that character to continuously move forward. You have to get to the root of what your character wants. But the key is this. Acting is doing something to another person. So you need something that will motivate you to take actions. It can't just be an ideal that motivates you. Think of the ideal of justice. You could want justice. Say that we're creating a character, an altruistic, optimistic young paladin who wants to change the world. We'll use my friend Ileana. She's going to help explain how to get to the root of what your character wants. Ileana, what do you want?
I want justice.
That makes sense. Okay. How does that help you play your character? You need an action, something that you want to do.
I want to do justice.
Better. How? What are you actually going to do?
I'm going to vanquish the unjust.
What happens if you are in a morally gray dilemma? If you are faced with saving a 6-year-old child or saving 6 fully grown adults? Where's the justice in that? Does having justice as an ideal, wanting to vanquish the unjust, how does that help you make character decisions like this? What will getting justice accomplish? What do you want?
I want to make the world a happier place.
Better. You still need an action, something that you can do. Think of a verb. Acting is doing something to another person. What do you want to do to me?
Oh, I want to make you smile.
That is a great answer. You will never be caught in a situation of thinking, oh, well, what would my character do here? Because you know, your character's motivation is that she wants to make people smile. If I told you to get on stage and act just, you couldn't do it. And don't feel bad that you couldn't. It's impossible. You could launch into some monologue about what your character thinks about justice, what happened to your character in their past that makes them want justice so badly, but that isn't what I asked you to do. I asked you to act just. It's just too vague. It's not possible. But if I told you to stand on stage and make me smile, you could. You could probably think of an infinite number of ways to get me to smile. And what those ways are will be dictated by the rest of what your character is. But this is that character's motivation. And I'm not saying that wanting to see people smile and the ideal of justice are the same thing. I'm rather saying that when you boil it down, when you get to the root of what actually drives your character, that motivation isn't justice. This young paladin doesn't want justice. She wants to see people smile. And I hope that you'll agree that that actually is a much better and more interesting venue of portraying a character's actions and could lead to some very beautifully bittersweet moments in storytelling. So if you know the theory of what your character wants, honorable, paladin, knightly, but you are still having trouble role-playing that character or getting into the mind of the character, or you're having trouble writing that character's dialogue, it sounds clunky, it doesn't sound believable, it sounds like you rather than the character's voice, it may be an indication that you have a little more work to do on the character themselves in order to figure out what makes that character tick. And asking the right questions is only part of it. You have to know how to give the right answers so that you are always directly helping yourself. And that takes an immense amount of specificity. These are potentially pretty complex concepts, so I decided to split this video into 2 parts to make them more palatable. So if your head is spinning and you're completely lost, I encourage you to watch this video again in the hopes that you will glean something helpful from it. So in the meantime, if you enjoy listening to my perspective as an actor when it comes to telling fantasy medieval stories, then you're definitely going to want to check out this video.